Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. My name is Scott Starantino. I'm with Williams Rippon Associates, and we're going to talk about claims consolidation today. Let me start with a couple of housekeeping items. If you have any questions, please feel free. You should see on the left side of the screen a bubble that allows you to send chat to the moderator. If you go ahead and do that with your questions, we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. We plan on spending a half hour. We'll get you out of here by 12:30. And for those that have missed our previous web conference, we're getting that put onto YouTube, and we'll be doing the same with this so you can go back to the information in the conference. Okay, so this is effective claims tracking, claims consolidation. So in our last conference, we asked a couple of questions to the participants. Number one, how are your claims trending compared to previous years? Two, which locations have the largest number of claims? Third one is what types of injuries are affecting your operation the most? And the fourth, when are injuries happening the most? Is there a trend? So the answer is if you have multiple reports in different formats from your different locations, your different coverages, your answer is probably no. You're not really going to be able to track this information if you're getting data from multiple sources and they're in different formats. Here's an example. Let's say we have two different locations. Location one has one data provider, TPA. They're providing you a PDF report, and they might be sending you a different report for each coverage that you have at that location. Example is location number two. They're giving you an Excel export, so you can use the information, but it's completely different format than your first location. And I know you can't necessarily read those reports. We're going to show those in a little bit more detail in the coming slides. And I'm talking two locations. If you have multiple locations, multiple coverages, this gets more and more complicated. Okay, so how do you get around this? So what we have seen from some of our clients and people we've spoken with, they've done a number of different things. Number one, they just use multiple reports at the same time. So they get on a table, they spread them out, and they try and get a clear understanding of what's going on. The issue with that is it is hard to get a clear picture because you're seeing different types of information. The second thing we see a lot of is people cut and paste numbers into a spreadsheet. That can work. The problem is it takes an awful lot of time to do. It's a lot of work to put all that together, and there's a lot of opportunity to make mistakes when you do that. Third one is just focus on each location separately and don't try to use the information together. And the problem with that is you never really get the big picture. You can see what's going on with individual locations, but you don't really get a feel for how the operation works. Okay, so consolidating the data, getting it on one combined report. So this might be a little hard to see. We're going to walk you through. This is one of the reports that we provide to our clients. We call it our Consolidated Loss Run Report. And the idea is we're getting the data from multiple sources. We're consolidating it into a single report. The key things to take a look at here, if you look all the way to the left, see if I can get my mouse there, you'll see coverages. So we have workers' comp, we have auto, we have general. So we're combining different coverages together in one report. Even more than that, you'll notice as you look on the second column, we have different TPA values. So the idea is we're taking information from multiple TPAs, multiple formats, and we're putting them into a single report. And by the way, this is not real data. This is dummy data based on the formatting that we use on a regular basis. And you can also see you might have different claim number formats, but all the information, the financial information, the formatting is consistent for all of your TPAs, all of your coverages. And that's the idea here. Okay, so how do we do this? There's three basic steps in order to consolidate your information. One, first of all, you've got to get the information from your data sources, your TPAs. And you want to get that on a schedule. You want to start getting your data on a regular schedule so you can have a regular reporting frequency. And one important thing to note is it must be in a format where you can manipulate the data. So Excel spreadsheets work pretty well. A lot of different tools can import that information so you can get it into a single database. Text file also will work. Now, you might hear a flat file. That's basically just a text file. It's a text file in a very specific format, so you'd have to get the specifications for how that file works so you know how to take the data out of it. One important note, PDF's really not going to work. A PDF file takes a snapshot of the data, but it doesn't really give you the opportunity to cut and paste or to copy data. You can use really complicated techniques like optical character recognition or something like that, but you really want to get your data in a format that you can use. Excel, text file, really the two I would recommend. Your second step, once you get this information, you have to import it into a single database. Now, you have a couple of options for something like this. One that's popular is use just a database program. A good example is Microsoft Access. That's got a lot of built-in tools that allow you to take files and import the data, particularly with Excel spreadsheets. Because it is Microsoft, it works pretty well with your standard spreadsheet format. The second option is to build a custom interface. There's a lot of benefits to doing this. You have complete control over your data. You have complete control over your reporting. One of the problems with it, though, is that you really need to have a programmer on staff to handle something like this, or you need to contract someone to build you a fairly complicated piece of software. Your third step is to develop the reports based on your internal database. So after step 2, you've already consolidated your data. You have it in a standard format. Really all you need to do at that point is just build whatever reports you need. Okay, let's get more detail on the different steps. So number 1, get the files. Every TPA, every data source should have some type of export file available. And what you need to do is contact them directly and ask what's available. We have found that Excel exports are pretty common. I think for everyone we deal with, everyone's been able to provide some type of Excel export. It might be called a CSV file or a tab delimited, but it's basically can be imported into Excel. One important note, make sure it has all the fields that you need, and the export can usually be adjusted. We have seen in the past where we've requested an export and we've gotten the data, but it really didn't have all the information we needed. And we're going to get into more detail in future slides on what information you might be looking for. But if it doesn't have what you need, you definitely need to make sure that you can request a more detailed export that will give you the information that you want. Direct access to pull the exports is best. What I mean by that is a lot of times you're going to find that these TPAs, these data sources, have some kind of a web interface where they can just give you a user ID and a password. You can log in yourself when you need the reports, and you can actually generate the report and pull it. That's great for a number of reasons. Number 1, you get it whenever you need it. And number 2, if you're defining this report, you know it's going to be the same report every time you pull it. The second option, automated export on a schedule is also good. So there's a lot of systems where you might not have access, but they can program their system to automatically send you either a secure email or some kind of a notification that the report has been pulled and is ready. So that works pretty well also, as long as you can get the schedule on your schedule, on what you need. Finally, you could do a monthly request. This is where you would have to put in a request, either email or a phone call. Every time you need the report, they'll pull the report and they'll send it to you. And that can work, and that might be your only option in some cases. The big thing with that is make sure that you request a file early, because we have run into issues where we request a file, and it might take a few days to get that back. So make sure you're not requesting that on the day you're trying to run these reports. Consistent export is the key. You really want to make sure, more than anything, that you're getting the same data every single month. Otherwise, any automated system you have to handle it is going to be a problem. Okay, so more on getting the files. What fields do you need? Now, obviously, this depends on some of the reporting that you're going to be doing, but at a very minimum, you're probably going to want the claim number, the coverage type, the location. Now, the location is a tricky one because the way you want to code a location isn't necessarily the same way your different sources want to load a location or how they want to code it. if you're getting it from, let's say, 10 different TPAs for 10 different sets of locations or multiple coverages, you need to have some kind of a lookup table so you can end up getting a consistent location code in your final database. Status, open claims, closed claims, the dates that happened, injury dates important, basic description, and some financials. You want that broken down as much as possible. And what I mean by that, you might, from some TPAs, just get a general total incurred value. You'd really like to get payments, reserving, broken down by, medical indemnity, legal payments, things of that nature. So the more it's broken down, the more useful it can be for you. Even if your initial reporting is pretty basic, you can always combine that in your reports. But if you ever want to get more detailed in the future, you really need that information in that level of detail. And a note there that they may have more or less fields available. What you need to do is create a standard set that you will need in your database. So if a lot of information is coming in, you're going to take those particular fields that you need. And if a TPA is not able to provide that kind of information, first, obviously, try and see if you can get that information, but if there's no way you can get that, you have to determine, can you live without those pieces of information, and how do you make it work in your database format? Okay, so the next step is to import the files. So you need to choose a platform to build your data bridge. This goes back to, are you going to build something in Microsoft Access? Are you going to build some kind of a custom interface? Many options out there. It really comes down to your level of comfort with either custom or access, or who do you have access to that could help you build something of that nature. Second item is you want to build a separate bridge for each data source, and I cannot stress this enough. Let's say you have 4 different sources, and let's say you were able to define the fields that you want for all 4 sources. Okay, so they're giving you the exact same file format. It might be tempting to use that single bridge to handle all 4 of those. You really don't want to do that because we have found that even if something is in a specific format now, it might not be 6 months from now. It might not be a year from now. So if you're going to have to adjust that bridge, you'd rather have 4 copies of the same bridge for your 4 different sources, because then you'll only have to change one. If in the future you have it as a single bridge and something splits out, you're going to have to kind of reprogram your system. And you also want to make sure that you can handle adding bridges, removing bridges, adjusting bridges without reprogramming the entire system, because you are probably going to get more sources moving forward. And that's what we've found. We started out with a certain number of sources, and we keep growing every year to more and more TPA sources of data, and so we have to put a new bridge in to handle that information, but we don't have to reprogram our entire system to do that. So as you're building these separate bridges, choose the fields that you need for each source, and as I talked about earlier, it may require some kind of a lookup table. We've seen that specifically with coverages, or at locations, possibly with coverages. Goal is for consistency in your final database. So I put an example. If a claim is open, we have seen some TPAs will mark their column with a capital O. Some will say it's open. Some will say opened. You might see reopened. You might see different things that all mean the same thing, open. When you get that into your database, you want to make sure that you have a single value in your database. So everything that represents opened can be O, and everything that represents closed or final or anything like that would be, C, for example. That way, once it's in your database, you have a standard single format. Number 3 is very, very important. Know what to do with data that doesn't fit your system. So what I mean by that, let's say you have your lookup table for your locations. You have 10 different locations. And let's say information comes in that doesn't match any of those 10 locations. So what are you going to do with that data? You have to make sure your system doesn't just ignore it and forget that ever existed, because then you're going to have reports that aren't accurate. You need to know what to do with that information. So you might want to say that if it doesn't meet those 10 different location codes, come up with a default location code that handles everything that's unknown, and at least flag it. That way when the reports come out and you see these unknowns, you can go back to the TPA and track what's going on. Maybe a new location's been added and you weren't aware of it. Or maybe they coded it wrong. So either way, you'll know to be able to take care of that information. And that's why exception reports work, warnings work, creating, in the case of a location, creating a location that's an unknown location, as long as you're able to look at that regularly and understand what's going on with the data. And then the note, I've already touched on this, but you may need to add bridges for new locations, TPAs, or whatever, or change an existing bridge in the future. TPAs will change their systems. Everyone's upgrading to new technology. Even though they give you a certain format right now, they might change that in a year if they have a new system. So be prepared to make these kind of adjustments in the future. Okay, so number 3, develop the reports. So once your data is in a single format, you can just design reports based on that format. You don't have to worry about the import part of that anymore. Access and tools like that have a built-in reporting function. And so you can build reports, you can save them, you can reuse them. You can click on the report and it'll come up with a date range or a date field. So you can get new reports every single month using that same template. Be prepared to add reports over time. You might want to start with a basic consolidated loss run, just a loss run report that consolidates all your TPA data, all your locations, all your coverages. And that's fine. As people start seeing your reports and as your reports become more useful to them, they will come up with ideas. And that's great. You want to see that. But they will come up with, that's great that you can do this. Now can you do whatever? So be prepared in your system to be able to handle adding new reports in the future. We have been doing this constantly. We started with the consolidated loss runs, and that became really popular. So now we have, graphical reports, lag reports, all these different types of reports. And so 2 pieces had to be in place to make that happen. Number 1, we had to make sure that we originally were importing enough information to get these new report styles. And number 2, we needed a system that was flexible enough that we could go from a PDF type report to a graphical report to Excel export. So, think about what you might be looking for in the future and make sure whatever system you put in place can handle all that information. Finally, keep all your old data even when you report new data. And we've touched on this in the first web conference, but it's worth talking about again. Even if you're only putting the current month data out, keep track of your previous month's data. You'll go back to it. You will always go back to it. Especially, we just talked about how new reports might become, they might request new reports. Well, if they request a new report, it's quite possible they're going to request old data with the new report. Great, I love what you've provided. Can I see this new report for last year's data so I can get a comparison, for example? So always keep your old data. A couple ways you can do that. One is you can maintain it in the same database, but just date stamp it. Every time you're pulling in new data, stamp it so you know when that data is valid. Another thing you can do is you can copy the entire database. And that's something, particularly if you look at like a Microsoft Access, you can copy the entire database over. So you can name your database reporting January 2014. And then in February, you can copy the entire database over, call that reporting February 2014, and then re-import the data, so now you've only got February's data in that particular database, and then you'll just keep copying the databases as time goes by. So those are the basics of consolidating your reporting. Couple things to touch on before I get into what we're doing in the future. You really need to take a look at your technical capabilities and build a system that's going to work with the facilities that you have in place. You also need to take into account security, especially if you have an Access database and you're building this, let's say, on your own work computer, and it's a laptop. Is your laptop password protected? Is it always in a secure location? If you're using a network drive at your office, if you could have the Access sitting on your computer, but the actual data is sitting in a database on a network drive. How secure is that network drive? Who has access to that network drive? The other thing is, what happens if someone steals the drive or the drive crashes? You have to be prepared for all those conditions because you're talking about an awful lot of pretty critical data. Okay, so we've got here listed a couple of the upcoming lunch and learns we're going to be doing. So, the first one we really talked about just a general concept, and this one we're talking about how do you do the basics of consolidation. I think the next one's actually going to be a lot more fun. It's going to be a lot of examples of now that you've figured out that you need to do it, and now that you've figured out how to consolidate, what can you do with it? What do the reports look like? And we're going to show an awful lot of examples of some of the things that you can do, and frankly, why are they useful? Anyone can produce reports, but understanding where the usefulness in the reports, I think, is really beneficial. So that's going to be the next time. We're going to do it in about 2 weeks. And if you go to williamsripa.com/upcoming events, we'll have it listed here pretty shortly. So we're going to do report examples in 2 weeks, and then the following one is going to be data access and security. So, we've talked about the concept and building it, and we show you all these reports, but how do we keep all this information safe? What are the tools you can use to make sure that you are comfortable storing this amount of critical data? And like I said, we're going to put all this stuff on the website. Also, if you missed our first conference, we're working on getting the YouTube put on. We'll have this YouTube put on also, and we'll send out emails to let you know where you can access all that information. And now I'm going to open it up. If there's any questions, you can go ahead and text to the moderator. There's the button on your left of your screen. It's a little cloud-looking button, and if you do that to moderator, I'll be able to see any questions that come in. Okay, I'm going to touch on one question about going back to the IT, the technical side of this. So I talked about doing an access database. I talked about doing more of a custom interface. What are the pros and cons? Well, I think one of the pros is, let's talk about access first. And I use access. We could talk about any kind of database software that's already built in. I think one of the most immediate benefits of using something like an access database is you can get started on that pretty quickly without having a full programming background. There's a lot of tools built in, a lot of graphical interface that allows you to build these tools without having to actually code programming. Now, I'd say one of the benefits of doing a custom interface would be that you have a lot more flexibility. Now, you can do an awful lot with something like Access. And frankly, as you develop your technical experience along with using the Access, you can do more and more. There's a lot of things you can do behind the scenes as you get more of the programming side of things. But what I have found is a true programming language allows you to do pretty much anything you can imagine. Now, you have to have the programming experience to do something like that, and that's one of the cons of doing a custom interface is the level of programming experience. We've built a custom web-based interface, and so there's been a lot of pros for us with that. We allow people to actually log into the system. We manage all the data security. We don't have to worry about specifically where these individual hard drives sit with the data. We've got that all in a single web-based location, and we have our on-site and off-site backups to handle that. So, that's the route we chose to go. We felt that was going to give us the most flexibility. Okay, well, with that, I think that's going to be it for today. We appreciate everyone's attendance, and go to williamsripa.com/upcoming events and register for the next conferences. We'd love to see you, and feel free to contact us. Here's the contact information: scotts@williamsripa.com. The phone number is 972-931-8307. Again, there's a lot of technical information, and we went over it fairly quickly. But if you have any more questions or want any more detail, I'd be happy to sit down and talk with you or email back and forth, give you more information about this. So again, thank you so much for attending the conference, and hope to see you next time.